We're just waiting on one or two more people that have said they're coming, so I'm just waiting for them, but thank you for your patience. We'll start in a couple minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be the MC for this afternoon. I'll start with some housekeeping, followed with some acknowledgements. With housekeeping, if I could please ask that you turn your mobile phones off or put it on silent if you don't mind. If you need to use the bathroom facilities, they are to my left, but to your right through the corridor there. And in case of an emergency, we have 2 exit doors on either side of the auditorium, and the muster point is the oval across the road, across Marmion Road there. Now on to acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge, firstly, the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Noongar people, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and recognize their continuing connection to land, sea, and community. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'd like to also acknowledge our sponsors today. Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services, along with the Melville Baha'i community. I'd like to extend a warm and special welcome to all of you who have come here today to join us for this forum, and also for anyone that's joining us on live stream. Welcome. Today's event is part of a series of mental health and well-being forums, where we will explore relevant topics with the help of expert panel members. Baha'i communities all over the world are working to engage in social discourses on topics that are impacting our communities and society at large. The program today will be video and audio taped, and the material will be shared on Mind and Soul Matters podcast series and clips for Baha'i Blog and social media. You will find a number of previous panelist presentations on the podcast series as well. I would, of course, like to acknowledge our three wonderful presenters today, who will share with us some of their professional and personal insights on this topic. The format of this event is such that each of the speakers will have 10 to 15 minutes to speak, and then we will open the floor to questions from the audience. So today's topic is constructive resilience amongst migrant women. This is an interesting topic, constructive resilience. It reflects their ability to navigate and overcome challenges while actively shaping positive outcomes for themselves and their communities. Migrant women often have faced and continue to face multiple layers of adversity, including cultural barriers, economic inequalities, and gender-based or faith-based discrimination. Despite these obstacles, constructive resilience manifests through their capacity to harness their personal strengths, community support networks, and resourcefulness. Our two sponsors, Ishar and the Baha'i community, support and empower constructive resilience through various avenues. Baha'i contributions to constructive resilience encompass spiritual empowerment, community building, advocacy for justice and equality, education, service to humanity. These efforts aim to foster resilience at both the individual and collective levels, contributing to a more unified and resilient global community. Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services have for 30 years served and supported refugee and migrant women through services such as physical and mental health services, domestic violence, social support, and advocacy and education. Our two first panelists are here from Ishar, and our third panelist is a lived experience migrant woman from the Baha'i community. So I'll begin with a short bio about our panelists. Our two first panelists are going to co-present together, so I'm going to read their bios one after each other, and then I'll give the floor to them. And then once they are done with their presentation, I will then introduce our final panelist and give her bio. So I'll start with our first panelist, Parisa Faramarzi. Parisa is a social worker working within settlement services supporting refugee and migrant families and in family and domestic violence support services. She has experience in early childhood and primary teaching and youth work. Her passion lies in empowering individuals and communities and advocating for social justice and equality. Parisa is currently working at Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services as a social worker. So that's Parisa's background. And now our next panelist, who's also from Ishar, Ms. Samar Muawad. Samar is a counselor and creative arts therapist and a registered member of the Professional Association for Creative Arts Therapists in Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. She graduated with a master's degree in creative arts therapy from Murdoch University in Perth. She has experience working with individuals and in group therapy. She follows a culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and patient-centered approach using art for therapeutic, non-artistic purposes. Her interests include working with women from a multicultural background who experienced or are experiencing family domestic violence. She also works with youth and adults with grief, anxiety, self-esteem, and other psychological difficulties. Samar has a bachelor degree with honors in speech pathology and had the privilege to work as a speech therapist in Dubai in the first governmental early intervention program called the Dubai Early Childhood Development Center. She was part of a multidisciplinary team and worked closely with family counselors to empower families of children with disabilities. Please welcome our two first presenters.
Hi everyone, I'm Parisa and thank you Dina for the introduction. I'll give a quick explanation of my role at Ishar and then I'll pass it on to Samar. So as Dina mentioned, I'm a social worker at Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services, working within the settlement program known as the Settlement Transition Service. And that the aim of the program is to support new refugee and migrant families who have arrived in Australia to navigate the systems that they will be operating in, and kind of work through some of the challenges that come up for families who first move into a new country. And I also work within the Family and Domestic Violence Service, so working with women who are experiencing family and domestic violence at different levels. So yeah, we're there as a culturally responsive service. We work with many different cultural backgrounds, and it's very needs-based. So when families or women, we predominantly work with women. So when women come to us, based on the programs that can kind of work with them, we'll support them as needed. So Samar and I work quite closely because often there's a lot of emotional, mental health, well-being challenges that come up. So we kind of try to create a wraparound service for the women we work with, where I kind of work with some of the practical challenges, or also known as some of the psychosocial challenges that come up, and then Samar looks at it from a different angle. So I'll pass it on to
Sorry. No, I'm fine, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Samar. I'm from Lebanon. I've been here for 5 years, and I've been working with Ishar for 3. As Parisa said, I work with women from a multicultural background who are experiencing who have experienced family domestic violence. I also work with clients from who are suffering with mental health issues, and youth clients as well. As Parisa said, sometimes we work with the same clients for different reasons. Usually, for example, Parisa sees the client first and then does the risk assessment, because we don't work with clients with high risk. We work, and then when the risk assessment is done and the client requests counseling, then she comes to me and then the work starts. You might see me use my phone, but I'm not like texting or anything. It's just like so I don't forget or miss any important information. So basically, all the women at Ishar come from a multicultural background. So they're either even if they're born here, but they are coming from a multicultural background. And we have lots of migrants, lots of refugees and asylum seekers. So what does that mean in terms of culture? Because we all know where we come from is like a collectivist culture. It cares more about like the community and the sense of community and the compliance in the community. Compliance sometimes and conformity means, it means like being compliant with anything that is happening inside that culture. Sometimes we might not even be okay with what's happening in our culture, but because we're part of the community, we're just gonna be conforming and complying with it. And the perfect example would be domestic violence, for example. If my mother-in-law or my mother experienced FDV, it's like normalized if it's happening to me in a way. So what happens when a client is, a migrant is moving to Australia, there's a big shift from the collectivist culture to the individualistic culture that is here, which is concerned more about the personal interest of individuals rather than the community. And even the way we talk about ourselves in the community, it's about the role that we have, like I'm a good mother, or I'm a good sister, or I'm a good housewife. But then in an individualistic culture, it's more about the actual personal traits of the person. Like you hear them say things like, I am smart, or I am kind. Okay, so there's a big difference there as well. What happens with that, once someone moves, they're like in a new culture, they have to conform to something new now. The consequence of that would be isolation, because we're not used to that. And there's lack of support, like they can't find the support that they need. You have no idea how many women who come to Ishar have suffered like for months before actually finding Ishar. There's the language barrier as well, like especially coming with like no language, no English whatsoever, and coming here. And then even like when there's interpreters, sometimes it's not that easy to find the language, and then interpreters are anyway, like it's another issue with interpreters. So there's that, there's the financial difficulties as well that we go through, and then there's even like how do I raise my children? Do I raise them, like there's a new culture now, do I raise them as per the new culture, or do I still raise them as per my culture, my religion, my background? So there's a lot of changes that are happening with someone being either displaced or choosing to actually be here on their own. So people think that once you're here, then your trauma is like, like done. I'm displaced, my country is going through war. Once I'm here, then everything is fine. But no, it's not. Like there's a whole other kind of, difficulties and traumas that we go through once we're here. And obviously that would affect all these issues, and the consequences will affect our mental health. There's a lot of anxiety, lot of depression. There's that sense of loss as well. It can be losing your family home. It doesn't have to be, so basically grief and loss, it's not just about losing a person. It's about losing a house, a pet, a phase in your life that you used to feel, good about. But now that you're here, you lost that. Losing that contact, losing the food actually. I spent like 3 years here before knowing that there's one good Lebanese place that actually reminds me of my home, and we know how food is like a big thing in our culture. So there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of anxiety, stress. Sometimes if a woman is pregnant and coming here, she might have had postnatal depression as well, because she don't know how to, because she doesn't have her support system here to help her, with the baby. There's a lot of conflict within the family because of how do I raise my children now. I think I've covered everything. It took me some time not to look at my phone, so that's good. And then from that comes the physical health issues, because when I'm stressed, I'm not sleeping well. I have to take care of my kids on my own sometimes, because maybe my husband is still in Iran, or in a different country where he needs to support us from there. So I'm here on my own doing a single mom work, for example, not sleeping well, and then that affects your physical health, and then not sleeping well affecting your physical health will automatically affect your mental health, because the mind and the body are connected. Once the mind is working against the body and vice versa, then your mental health and your mental well-being and your quality of life would be negatively affected.
So We just heard a little bit about some of the challenges that comes from the shift in culture of going from a collectivist to an individualist, but we also want to acknowledge that there's so much resilience in women and in families in general, of those who do migrate and go to a different country. And I think sometimes we can look at someone who might not speak any English or might have many barriers that exist for them, and there's this assumption that they won't know how to do something, but actually when we think about it, take a step back, this person has probably gone to multiple different countries, gone through multiple processes to get to where they are, and I think that in itself is a testament to their resilience, to their strength. And I think this is something we try to highlight, because it's really hard for some of especially the women, to be able to stand up for themselves, to kind of ask for things on their own, because sometimes they come from cultures where that's not normalized, or women are not allowed to go and ask questions or question things or ask for their rights, really. So that's where we kind of try to advocate for some of our clients. So the resilience that we see every day is huge. There's kind of this, I think sometimes we look at it as, they're surviving, they're doing well, they're okay, but actually a lot of the women, although there's so much adversity, so much trials, we can see that they're holding on to hope, because it's like, okay, I've had all of these experiences, it's been hard, or even, I have experienced even discrimination in Australia while I've been here, but then what is it that I can do to improve my life and the lives of my children? And that's a very common pattern and trait that we see in the women we work with, and it's so valuable because we can see that, even though there's so many challenges, they're still ready to show strength and to show resilience. And I think that it can be a hard balance to practice, because sometimes the challenges can be overpowering. For example, when there is an experience of family and domestic violence, who do I go to when my home and my safe haven is not safe? Or where do I go when I don't have enough money to buy food for my family? So there's multiple things that need addressing, but I think what we try to do, or try to take a step back, that we're not doing it. All we do is really guide the process and walk alongside these women to be able to build that capacity to do it for themselves, because they all have that capacity. It's just a matter of navigating it, because the systems are very complex, the legal systems are quite complex, the health system is very complex, so it's just kind of breaking that down to see what can we do together. It's more of a partnership. We kind of accompany one another to be able to kind of address some of those needs, and that takes immense resilience, and I think it takes time to get those things done, but I think in that sense it's there's still hope, and I think that element of empowering someone to hold on to that hope is where our job is, I think. So I think sometimes it can be back and forth. We take 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, but it's all a matter of kind of just navigating it, figuring it out as we go. And just try to kind of think about what could come next. But I think some of the ways we try to address resilience is looking at economic well-being, looking at mental well-being, physical well-being, and then sometimes there's these extra things that we don't think about, but it's actually cultural practices. Coming here, sometimes it's different. Like, for example, in a country where the woman listens to their parents until they get married, and then they come here and they have their husband to go by. So I think that kind of adds extra complexities. Or coming here and you have a set of way you parent, but parenting looks different, or we're taught to parent in a different way. So then how do you kind of hold on to what you know and then try to kind of fit in or do what you're told is right, for the fear of losing your child or figuring that out. So I think, there's a lot of education involved, and a lot of work around, you know, that raising of awareness of, okay, these are the systems that we work in, but I think what stays consistent is that strength and resilience, and I think the practical things and the mental well-being that comes around it just tries to address those different aspects so that they are able to flourish and keep moving forward instead of feeling stagnant or feeling like there's no support. Because also, like, we come from places where we have family, and then all of a sudden we're in a place where there's no friends, no family, no social network even. Where do I go if I want to hang out with somebody? So so then there's like social spaces that we have to like kind of encourage that civic participation in the community, looking at gaining further education, further employment. So I think that's where we kind of try to encapsulate that resilience. It exists. It's just a matter of bringing it out of, and actually reminding the person, because it's there, but you do have it. When things are hard, just remember that you are very strong. Like I also come from a refugee background, so I've seen that in my family, my parents, and to see it over and over again, it means there's things that are not being addressed, but then how do we raise this awareness within the systems? So I think like my role is advocating within those systems. When people when they hit a wall, it's like, okay, how can we acknowledge this? How can we address this together? Which is really important because of language barriers, sometimes those needs are not met, but it's possible, but someone doesn't know how to do that for themselves. So that's kind of where I come in. But we'll go a bit into our roles and, you know, the approaches that we use as we speak. So I'll just pass it.
So technically, I'm just gonna be talking now about like what the client, like once we're in the counseling room, what's happening there, yeah. So basically, what does the client bring to therapy when they decide that they want to do counseling? So first of all, there's a lot of stigma around mental health and counseling itself, like, oh, it's like for sick people, or does that mean that I'm crazy, or like we hear those words. So there's a lot of psychoeducation there about, you know, what being in therapy means, how even the therapist has a therapist. So just normalizing actually, you know, being in the counseling room, in counseling sessions. And then there's the client when they come, especially from a migration background or like refugee, they're like in survival mode. So they're like basically, okay, I need to put food on the table. Like this is like very secondary for me. Maybe my doctor told me I should be here. I don't know how much this is gonna work. So this is where they are, and it's totally understandable because like, yeah, like if a doctor with like 15 years of experience in Iran is not able to practice being a doctor here because of, you know, like the accreditation, etc., then you're gonna have to worry about like what kind of job you're gonna do here to be able to provide food for your family. There's a lot of also normalization of domestic violence, and that can come from, as I said, that compliance within the community about like, yeah, that happened to your sister or that happened to your mother, and that's okay. And they come with that, like, oh, he did not slap me, or no, he did not do that. But then once we start psychoeducation about what domestic violence actually is, then they will be like, oh, okay, you know, like there's more than just like being kicked or slapped or than that. And sometimes that means she might be even more isolated. Like she's not just isolated by being in this country, she might be even isolated within her own family, because now she's like, okay, what do I do with that? Where do I go with that? Especially if she's dependent on her husband. And there's a lot of shame and guilt as well, because especially like when like I'm here, for example, and my family in Lebanon now, like there's a lot of things happening in Lebanon. So I'm like, why do I get to feel safe and not my family? So there's a lot of guilt around that as well. So this is something that we address usually in therapy. What I need to be as a counselor is I need to be an effective multicultural service provider. I cannot just be, myself. I have to know who this person is, what baggage they are bringing with them in therapy, where they're from, their gender, their role, their socioeconomical status. Was there war? How did they come here? Did they live in a refugee camp for some time or not? Do they speak English? Do they not speak English? How was their experience coming here with other service providers? Because that can be traumatizing, like when they're not taken seriously because they're not speaking the language, for example. We had a lot of clients who lost faith in, the system here, or like service providers, because of their bad experiences. So that's something that I should be doing as a multicultural service provider. I have to be aware of my own biases and my own values, so I don't enforce them or force them on my client coming from a different background. I have to trust my client and what they want and what they need, instead of I know better than you. Even like that relationship is like an equal relationship, which is something very new for women, especially. Like to be like, how we like put doctors like they're gods almost, right? But they're not. But yeah. So this is how people, like women, come to sessions, like with that that idea of, oh, she's just gonna tell me what to do and I'm just gonna do it, which is not the case, because this is her session, this is her therapy. She needs to put her own goals. Obviously, I'm gonna be helping her, but she needs to know that it's an equal relationship. And this is where it actually starts, that empowerment of women here in that sense. It is person-centered, obviously, no judgment, empathy, congruence, unconditional positive regards for the client. What else? I think I've covered everything. And mainly the goals of therapy would be, as I said, as Parisa talked about resilience, it's to actually acknowledge that resilience and how strong are we to actually be doing that, to actually leave our home country, start from scratch, finding new jobs. Like it's like commendable. It's like so empowering for me to see women who don't speak English, but they actually like decided to do this and come here, and I can still see hope in their eyes. Like it's so powerful, it's so beautiful. And at the same time, there's that double-edged sword with resilience. So, for example, it's a very recent example, how I'm more worried about my family than my family is, because they're like, oh, we're used to that, it happens, we don't know, and that's fine. But it's not fine. We can't be getting used to trauma and war and be okay with it. So that's how resilience sometimes can be like affecting us in a way where, okay, I'm just gonna accept anything that is gonna happen to me, and it's fine, we got used to it. So we actually work on that as well. We do work on, it's a strength-based approach, like reminding the client about how strong she is, what are her strengths for her to be able to be here. Because when things are happening, it's not that easy to actually remember how strong you are or what your strengths are, especially when you're going through a lot of changes. We try to find the support system as well here. Because it's totally different from being back home. My family is there. So who can I actually trust here? Who I can rely on? And we start actually building that support system. We work a lot on boundaries within the community as well, especially if a woman decides to leave her abusive relationship, she might be judged by her own community. So that's something that we actually work on for her to be able to be like, no, like that's not okay, like I cannot stay in this relationship. And we get a lot of those clients because they're scared of losing the community, then they actually sometimes stay in the relationship. So there's a lot of work on boundaries, and boundaries is a new word for like, for us, because like we don't have it. So that's another thing. We usually do either individual counseling or group counseling. And in the group counseling, there's a lot of support, because she can see other women going through the same thing, so there's like an empowerment there. Oh, okay, it's not me going through this. The shared experience can actually, you know, show you like, oh wait, so this person was here before me and look where she is now. She has a job, she has a, you know, she's happy here, she actually knows her rights, she knows the system more. So it's like showing what you can be in few years as well. And sometimes it can be like showing you your blind spots when you're too into the trauma or too into the problem, you cannot see from a different angle. But then you have someone else in the group who would be like, oh, maybe if you do this, then that would happen. So it's always a good idea to be in a group with people, women, especially women, sharing their lived experiences. I use creative arts therapies, which is the use of art for pure therapeutic purposes. So I'm not an art teacher, I'm a therapist, I'm a psychotherapist using art. My client doesn't have to be an artist herself, and it works perfectly with multicultural clients and women because English is not their first language. So sometimes even if she wants to write in her own language, because we have creative writings or poetry in the session, then it's not about me to understand what she's writing, it's about her own process and how this is making her feel when she's actually exploring or externalizing her trauma or her feeling on a piece of paper or in an object or in a music or in a song. And that could be like a bridge to home. Like if there's a specific song, for example, that, you know, makes you feel something, that would be like the closest thing that you can get to home, for example. So that's basically in a nutshell what we do. I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time. I'm gonna let Parisa now talk about her role.
Okay, I'll be super fast. So I'll try not to repeat some of the things because some of the I guess things that Samar described is also what our social workers do at the organization. But instead of a therapeutic context, we look at the practical aspects of the work. So I guess the social work workers at Ishar, our main job is advocacy. So we manage cases to get to or achieve goals that the women set for themselves. And there's a lot of advocacy. So I think one of the main things we've realized that, you know, it kind of could bridge that gap if it's done quite a bit, is raising awareness within government agencies, raising awareness within non-government agencies. So we often talk to other service providers about these extra barriers that exist for women who come from migrant refugee backgrounds. And so in you know, goal setting, in addressing needs, we look a lot at working in an, I guess, empowering approach, looking at strengths, so really actually bringing those strengths out. So, because once we do that, then the women know, actually, I can do this, I've got this is within me, this is what I've got. And it really brings out this courage to actually do things that they might not otherwise. For example, leaving an abusive relationship, or getting a job, or going to university for the first time, or actually going and getting the degree validated to be able to work while being a mother, or whatever that looks like, or getting their driver's license. So I guess as social workers, we look at all of these different aspects that can build independence within the woman, or build that extra confidence and courage for them to actually keep taking those steps, because we don't work with them for forever. We work with them for short periods of time. So within the longest we work with someone is a couple of years. So then how do we help each other, and how do we help them to build capacity? And I think that's just more learning alongside each other rather than doing it for them. So often I try to do things and explain what I'm doing so that next time they're able to do that for themselves, or they know how to do it, or where to go to get help. So I think that's kind of, that's where we work very similarly, but also like different way of working. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, and I know we're conscious of time. We were going to share a little bit about other services at Ishar, but We can either do it, we can have conversations, or there's also our website that has all the information and services on there. So it's just ishar.org. So yeah, so if anyone would like to have a look, you're welcome to. .au.
Thank you to both Parisa and Samar. So educational. I mean, I certainly have learned a lot just listening to what you do and the support that this organization, Ishar, provides to migrant women. The psychosocial support, so you've got psychology and social support, which is fantastic. So thank you for enlightening us. I think most of us know at least one migrant woman, if not more, or are a migrant woman ourselves here today, so we really could relate to some of the concepts that you shared and the challenges that migrant women have when they're displaced from their homeland. So thank you very much. Our third panelist is Ms. Sahba Salekian. Sahba is our lived experience panelist and a migrant woman. But I'll tell you a little bit about her background before she speaks. Sahba works as a corporate counselor, mediator, and a child consultant in family law. Her education is quite broad. She has a Bachelor of Science in Family and Children Pedagogy. She has a graduate diploma in family law. She has a master's in counseling and a postgrad in neuroscience, so she obviously likes studying. Sahba was a child during the golden age of Iran. Whilst on the verge of becoming a teenager, she witnessed a revolution. She experienced war and persecution as a Baha'i. She was first arrested when she was 19 years old, her crime being a children's class teacher, teaching spirituality and moral education to children, which were considered anti-regime activities. Her crime on subsequent arrests and summons were for similar activities, running children and youth spiritual empowerment programs, which were considered deception and crime against the national security. She has experienced interrogation and beating at a very young age. She got arrested again when pregnant. She was taken to jail with her 10-month-old baby. She ended up crossing the border and fleeing from Iran in search of safety. She became stateless overnight, arrived in Australia under its humanitarian law, learned English, endured heartache and betrayals many times, raised children, changed jobs, advanced her education, gathered and sustained an amazing circle of friends. She established a number of businesses, succeeded in some but failed in others. She suffered from and managed serious health conditions, and amongst all that, she lived overseas as a Baha'i volunteer. So that's testament to her background. But her constructive resilience came through. She's a seasoned traveler. She loves cooking and entertaining loved ones. She's in a committed and loving relationship for 35 years. She's a mother of 2 kind and responsible adult children, and her grandson is currently the central focus and the love of her life. So welcome, Sahba, to our panel. I feel like you should have shared some of that yourself because it would have more impact, because it nearly made me cry. But anyway, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. Does it have the voice? Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Dina Jun. When Parisa and Samar were talking, I thought that as if we did the presentation together. It was so interesting, and I just could not, like my head was, got hurt as much as I nodded. So thank you so much. They have given me 10 minutes to talk about my life. And like many Baha'is who went through revolution and persecution and all that, I cannot really squeeze anything into that. So if you want to hear about my life history, invite me to lunch. I will come. But I should tell you that a few years ago, my uncle, who was my pediatrician and doctor, is 92, living in Canada, and is the love of my life. He told me that I did not talk until I was almost 4. It was very broken. Mom my beautiful mom sitting here, was very worried and took me to her brother and said, brother, Sahba does not talk. And my uncle did all the examination and said, her hearing is well, she's just absorbing. So just talk to her and tell her stories. And thanks to mom, that's the love of my life, as I love words and I love poetry and I love storytelling. So it means that if I didn't talk for 4 years, the most important 4 years of my life, when I started talking at 4, I never stopped. So, and my friends who are here, they know that. I love talking. I love storytelling. I take any job. So now here, I'm in my element. I love this. So 10 minutes was really injustice to me. Very suffering. I'm suffering from it. But so I thought that rather than talking about the synopsis of my experiments and my life, that maybe many people cannot relate because they haven't come through that. And even now when I go back and look at that or look at Iran and what they're doing, I cannot even fathom myself. So I thought, how about I talk about the ingredient of constructive resilience, something that is applicable and everybody can apply to their lives. So I want to invite all of you to imagine a situation that you feel stuck in. I'm not going to put anyone on spot. Yeah, thank you, my English second language. So just imagine something that you feel stuck, because when we feel stuck, it means that stability has become rigid and we cannot move from it. So I thought I better do that, and then I bring myself to the session, as I always do in my counselings. And so today, I'm going to talk about the ingredient of constructive resilience. And through my education and talking and working with thousands of people over the past 26 years in prison, in Ishar years ago, multicultural women, many men in shelter, all that, I have realized that the ingredients of constructive resilience are hope, courage, and grace. And what is hope? What is the birthplace for hope? The birthplace for hope is when you have a goal, you have a pathway, and you have a sense of agency that you say, yes, I can do that. So today, for example, I have a hope that I can present a presentation that you find moving and can move you forward from any place that you're stuck. My pathway is this health forum that my gorgeous 3 friends have placed, and so I have this pathway to deliver. And my sense of agency is that I can do it. I can do it. And what is that sense of agency? It's courage. And we cannot live in this life without courage. But what is courage? People say, I have courage. So the birthplace for courage is whenever we are uncertain, we are at risk, or we are emotionally exposed. That's the time we need courage. So today, I am uncertain if I can deliver a good presentation. I'm at risk because what if when the presentation finished, you all say, oh my God, what was that? That silly woman with that accent, just come here. We were not ready for this. We wanted just to hear your life story. And I'm emotionally exposed because Dina, Neda, and Farah has trusted me with this. They even didn't ask for manuscript. They just said, come and talk. What if I let them down? So then, it's then when we have hope and we have courage is when we need grace. So I then come up with my grace to say, Sahba, you just do your best. Just do your best. And that's okay. English is your second language. Forever I mix he and she, forever. And my language construct is not polished. You can see that. I just go blabbering at times. So, but then I do a self-care and I said, you did your best. And then I trust your grace that you say, oh, poor woman has been through so much. yet found the courage to come here. And funnily enough, the research shows that hope, courage, and grace, they are not emotions that we feel. They are actually a cognitive construct. So we think hope, we think courage, and we think grace. And that's why we can teach it to others. That's why I can teach it to my clients, to be courageous, because then they see that, oh, yeah, these are the way, and you can show it and you can teach it to your clients. So, and that was for me one of the very best thing about constructive resilience. So in working through all these decades of working with people in variety of settings, I have come up, I'm a visual person, I have come up with a process for constructive resilience that we can go through and you can go through. So when problem happen that we are stuck, for example, just this week, I had a 16-year-old who is terrified of getting her driver license. I have another 62-year-old who now in 2-3 years to her retirement, he has got workplace allegation. I have a man who is a young man, and it's been years that he is not intimate with his wife, and he doesn't know what to do, how he can break this barrier. I have another boy who is struggling with weed addiction. So all this just was this last week that I was sort of dealing with them. And I take them through this process of constructive resilience that when we are stuck, just imagine that we all live in a sea called life. And at times, this sea is just fantastic. It's calm, it's collected, the sky is blue when we are swimming or we are in our row, or we are rowing in our boat, and everything is fantastic. Life is just cannot get better. We know that it's not gonna stay like that. A test and difficulty gonna happen in order to take us from the layer we are into our further growth. So at times we feel absolutely drowned in the problem. Something happened, is a health issue, is a financial issue, it's a legal issue, and we feel drowned in the problem. When we are drowning, what we do? When we are drowning in whirlpool, we are struggling. We are struggling through that, and we gradually get our head above the water in coping and surviving. We go to coping and survival. No one wants to stay in coping and survival. It's a very hard place, but that's much better than drowning. So when we get to hoping, either we go to helpful and adaptive coping mechanism, or we go to unhelpful and maladaptive coping mechanism. What is the unhelpful and maladaptive? It's drug, it's alcohol, it's weed, it's going online and getting intimate with different people, go to gambling, shouting at people, just having fight with people, bullying others, going and scrolling social media for hours, go online shoppings. All of them are maladaptive coping mechanism that we need to actually, if we are go to the maladaptive coping mechanism, we need to deal with that as a problem, and we need to get professional help in order to deal with that. But then we have adaptive coping mechanism. We go to counseling, we go to therapy, we detect the horizon to find any warm bodies that can love us and can guide us and can protect us. We go to self-care, we look after our health and our sleep and all that. So, and when we get there, we gradually move past the coping and survival, and we go to a striving. We see the shore, we see the line, and we say, okay, that's really good. This is really good. I'm getting there. I have enough support around myself. I'm looking after my health. I'm looking after my mental health. That's fantastic. Through striving, we get to thriving, and we thrive. We thrive the situation. It's very solution-focused process. and we get to Thrival, and eventually we arrive. We get to the shore. We arrive, we find a solution for that problem that we have. We arrive. The water is good, we are swimming, everything is calm, and I can say I arrived and deal with my problem. Fantastic. We know that it's not going to stay like that because another problem going to come. So I always thought, what's after that? What's after that? Like, what is that when you get to the point that you're really happy of the solution you have? And then I realized the next step after that is allow. We need to allow. And that's absolute state of detachment, contentment, and tranquility that we say, okay, welcome. The next problem, the next test and trial, welcome, because I know that I can get any time back to drowning and spring through to arrival. And that's my friend calls constructive resilience. And in this note, I want to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahba, for your passion. It comes through your 10 minutes of talking and your constructive resilience. I mean, the background you've had and what you've achieved, it really is testament to constructive resilience. So friends, this is time now to open to questions. Interestingly, Sahba spoke about 3 virtues that you need to sort of empower you to come through the trauma as an individual person. You spoke about hope, courage, and grace. We actually have a question on our live stream. Someone is asking if there is a role for faith in constructive resilience. I wonder if you or one of the other panelists would like to answer our first question.
We cannot get to them without faith. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And the faith, I call it God. I'm a believer of God. But let's call it force. Because for someone, maybe it's fishing. I don't know. Who can judge anyone? So for me, if I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't because of my faith, because of the Baha'i writing, because of the Baha'i philosophy on living, I don't know how I could have thrived, definitely. But there are millions of ways to get to that. But without faith, we cannot. We need a cord to hold on. Because if you don't, I believe, if we don't stand for one thing, we will fall for everything. So we need to have some, and that faith for me is that gives me hope, that whatever I'm going to do, I definitely make sure that I double check with my principles, with the Baha'i principles that I have. And I say, okay, that's a good way to go for me. But then for every one of you, everyone has their own pathway to get to that a goal that they have. I think I answered.
Thank you.
And sometimes clients come with they don't know what self-care is. They have no support here, and the only thing that is constant is their faith. This is what they bring with them here, and this is where we can actually start the work. This is what self-care is. If praying or you having faith and that belief in something bigger than you is what's gonna keep giving you that hope, and you being questioning, okay, what do I want now, etc., and using that faith in that way, then that's where we actually start, and regardless of what religion or what faith the client is from. So, yeah.
Thank you. Faith certainly is one of the key supports that we talk about in mental health. That people who have a community that they belong to or faith that they practice is a protective factor for mental health issues. Thank you. Any questions from our audience? Yes, Roger?
My name is Roger, and thank you, ladies, for wonderful presentation. It's really informative and educational. But I was wondering, with migrant or refugee or the other classification of women coming to Australia, the government thinks, or the system thinks, that just teach them English and then they'll be integrated, they'll be coping, they'll be performing, they'll be able to manage their lives, you know. I've had a little bit of experience working with conversational English for migrants, and I can see their struggles, I can see the pain on their faces, just trying to navigate the system. So how important is learning English? We know the government puts a great store on it, but how important is it for migrant women and refugee women and women who are traumatised to learn English and then be able to navigate the system?
Do you want anyone specific to answer that?
Are you directing that to anyone in particular or anyone?
The whole panel.
Okay.
I think the answer to that is very important. I think because we are operating in an English-speaking society, it's such an important tool to be able to express ourselves. Language is how we express what we want to say, what we're thinking, what we're internalizing. So it's very important, but in saying that, it's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with 2 terms of attending classes. And I think the issue is then when it comes to, for example, you mentioned like the government provides certain classes and things, that's very short term. So then if there are, I guess, financial issues and we can't pay for private tutors and classes, where do we go to keep learning that? When, as an example, I'm a mum of 2, can't really get out of the house other than those specific days, then that in itself becomes a challenge that maybe 10 years down the track, that woman is still grappling with this issue of language. So yeah, I would say quite important, but also it's a challenge in itself.
Not sure how to. It's more like the empowerment as well. Like as Parisa said before, like instead of filling the Centrelink form for her, for example, in English, what Parisa was doing is to actually walk her through it, so she is able to do that herself later, which is in English as well. But there's that model of showing rather than doing for, and I think that would be important. But unfortunately, like, so many things are really already hard for people who are educated. Like for me, like to manage like taxes, like I don't want, like no, like it's really hard to do that. And that's for someone who is speaking English, you know. So it's like, it's not that helpful, like how the systems are made. So yeah, just like conversational English is important because at least it's targeting maybe specific like conversation that she might be needing like in her day-to-day life. Yeah, but it's not enough, as Parisa said. Yeah.
Thank you for addressing the issue around language. Jasmine, as usual. Maybe wait, because we're needing a microphone.
I always ask a question, but anybody can address it. You talked about family domestic violence, etc. Can you clarify what is domestic violence? What's family domestic violence? Is it generally directed at the women, or is the women directed at the men? And is it only a binary between these two, or is it within the wider family, the wider community, the wider world?
So domestic violence is definitely like both genders can be
Perpetrators?
Perpetrators, yeah. And even it's in same-sex marriages as well, but it's not talked about more. And because of all the evidence and all the statistics, it's more like women are the victims in that. But yeah, it's definitely both genders. When it's like from a parent to a child, it's more like it's under child neglect and abuse. So it's there as well. And for the community, it can be more like the emotional and the mental abuse, because if a woman chooses to leave, but then women are like, especially with some cultures, like it's not okay for a woman to leave her household, like she's going to be destroying her family, the kids are going to be growing up without a father. So the community can have that emotional and verbal and mental abuse on the woman as well. So yeah, it can be like degrees of abuse that a woman can go through, and obviously men can go through that, but the statistics are like very different.
The main side is never counted, right?
Sorry?
The main side is never counted.
No, it is counted, of course, and there are services for, yeah, definitely. And there are services for men who are going through domestic violence, which is unfortunately, like, we don't, because like the statistic for women is like higher. We don't talk much about men, but yeah, you're totally right. Especially like men will not go and say like I've been abused or I've been, because it's not culturally acceptable sometimes, or like for a man to show weakness or show emotions. So it is harder maybe for men. Maybe there's higher a number of men who are going through that, but they're not able to go and talk about it because they're feeling shame around it. So yeah.
If you know anyone, any man, there is a program called Breathing Space in Communicare, and they have a men's shelter in Queenana and Rockingham, and I think one place, and the program for men empowerment and men in domestic abuse is fantastic. It's second to none. Breathing Space, breathing space in under Communicare. So you can just Google Communicare, and the program is fantastic.
Thank you, ladies. And it's good to know that, I think you mentioned, Samar, as well, that domestic violence is not limited to physical violence. It's the abuse can be many different forms. So thank you for your clarifications. We have perhaps time for one more question, and then we will wrap it up.
Hi, my name is Matthew. I actually have some mental health conditions myself, but I understand that, of course, that people coming from like different countries, particularly ones that are very sort of, I guess you could say, traditional or very conservative or very sort of, or even very religious, is that it is a quite a different cultural shift into sort of the Western sort of individualistic, liberal sort of like views of like. I mean, like in some of these traditional cultures, things like feminism may not ever have been heard of, but I know that, of course, also our own emotions can bring a worldview with that as well. One thing I know is that for people with, I know that despite cultural differences, we all have similar needs in things like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff like that, and that mental health conditions are, in ways, an adaptation to trauma. They're a way in which our mind and body is like our depression or anxiety is like saying, oh, don't do this, things could get worse, so don't do that. So it's like it's trying to protect us in a way and help us navigate through life. And I think it's like people need to realize that it's not bad to have mental health conditions. It's actually like it's a mental immune. It's something like a mental immune system, and that a lot of people, if you realize that it's not bad to have those things, it's actually good, because that means that your mind and body is basically protecting you 100% of the way, and that there are ways for people to get there. There are groups like Grow. There's a DSP for people who have disabilities. There's NDIS, and for people who can help as well, and also support groups online. There are mental health programs for counselling, and also online groups and support groups and stuff like that. And I just want to say thank you for at least being there to help people through these conditions and through these traumas, but help them know that like it's okay to have these mental health things. It simply means that you're fighting, and that you need to sort of trust yourself, and there's nothing wrong with you, and that you are supporting you through those things, and that.
Thank you, Matthew.
And that you are not alone.
Thank you. That's exactly what these forums are about educating us to understand the different topics that are presented, and certainly it's been a It certainly has been very enlightening and empowering to have our 3 women panelists here today. Thank you so, so much. So just in conclusion, constructive resilience amongst migrant women is a testament to their agency and determination in navigating adversity while making meaningful contributions to their new societies. And that's exactly what you shared with us today. A very big thank you to Ishar for co-sponsoring this event along with the Baha'i community of Melville. I'd like to thank obviously our expert panelists. I'd like to thank the organizing task force. And I also want to just put in a special thank you to a very special migrant woman who cooks for us or bakes for us at every single forum. You will notice that she always has her usual cupcakes, which we all have become very fond of. And she doesn't come to these forums, but she always wants to contribute in this very special way. So thank you to Mrs. Zarandian. Starting from the last forum, we provided a little more intimate space. So if anyone is interested in continuing this particular discourse in a more intimate setting, we've organized a space today in the foyer of the Baha'i Center. Sahba has kindly agreed to chat with the group, so she will meet you in the foyer at 4:30 for anyone interested, and she can have a conversation with you for half an hour. So we actually need to leave at 5 o'clock, so it'll be a short, intimate chat. Melville Baha'i Instagram page and Facebook pages will showcase all our activities, these forums that are coming up, and other similar types of activities that are run here at the Baha'i Center. Our next forum, in case you want to diarize it, is on Sunday, November 10th, same time, 3 o'clock, and it will be on youth mental health. And we will have Headspace, an organization, quite a prominent organization in the mental health space for youth, co-sponsoring with the Melville Baha'i community. So I hope you can make it to that. I've already mentioned Mind and Soul Matters podcast. They've featured many of our previous panelists, and our panelists today will also be on that podcast. So watch the space. Again, it'll be on the Facebook and Instagram pages. We have a wonderful volunteer with the bookshop. If anybody wants to have a look at the bookshop, what's available, the literature, you're welcome to do that and purchase any. And finally, please join us for some socializing and light refreshments. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thanks to those of you on live stream. Thank you.